Hi guys, this is Thomas, genius philosopher extraordinaire, coming at you with another video. Today we are discussing asceticism, in particular in the context of Schopenhauer, what it actually is, and why it's something that you may be inclined to practice in your own life, at least to a degree. True asceticism is really renunciation, and renunciation isn't really a viable path, especially in the modern world. It doesn't really accomplish anything. You might feel good because you're spiritually enlightened, but it doesn't really give you anything other than that spiritual satisfaction and pleasure, which is really, sort of hedonistic in a way. If you look at it, the most extreme form of asceticism would be full renunciation of the world, thereby retreating into a cave, metaphorically speaking, and just meditating and reading works of spirituality and becoming in touch with the universe. It's really, if you look at it in a certain way, it's really just hedonism, because all you get out of it is this sort of eternal pleasure and satisfaction. And it is the highest good, you might say, but that really is just hedonism. All pleasures are relative. You might say that the reason why you forsake pleasure in the first place is so that you can have access to a higher form of pleasure. Like some people suggest, I've heard people tell me to deny myself certain pleasures so that when I do those pleasures, they are more meaningful. So that's sort of voluntarily relinquishing a pleasure, but only in the service of making that pleasure more pleasurable in the long run. And there's more to it than just that. But it's essentially the same concept. Asceticism, to the fullest, is renunciation as we just described. And that renunciation is a similar principle to voluntarily relinquishing your pleasures so that you can have a higher form of pleasure. From my point of view, any kind of practice that we employ should be in service of something meaningful to us. For me, I haven't really found exactly what that is just yet, but we're working on it. The reason you practice philosophy is for some purpose, because you believe in something larger than yourself. And if you're Tolstoy, you would say it's Christianity, because the highest good you can possibly conceive of, maybe not conceive of, but on earth the highest good is the collective good of humanity, and that means transcending your own self, your own ego, even transcending your own family unit, even in transcending your own tribe and your own nation and everything else, your religion even. That is sort of something that needs to be elaborated upon, but even transcending your own religion and embracing all of humanity and loving and forgiving, that's the Tolstoyan perspective of Christianity, is to transcend everything and embrace humanity as a whole and forgive people who have wronged you or refuse to accept the word of Christ. You'd forgive them. That would be the Tolstoyan perspective, which is very closely related to asceticism, but that's more religious than asceticism necessarily needs to be. Minimalism is another form of asceticism. It's this trendy concepts these days where everyone has small houses and only owns the bare minimum of what they actually need to survive, rather than having all of these material possessions. Really clarifies the mind and allows you to have a more meaningful relationship with the things you actually do have and care about. So, in terms of actually practicing asceticism, it's really obvious what you're supposed to do. You should refrain from having sex, for example. Doesn't have to be forever. You don't have to be permanently celibate, but you should, give it up for a couple weeks and see if you feel any different. I used to fast all the time. I would do a daily fast. It was mostly for health reasons, but it's also spiritual at the same time. If you can go 18 hours without eating, or even you can go like multiple days if you really want to deny your bodily cravings gives you a higher degree of control over your own body and your own mind, because you're literally suppressing your own subconscious desires And especially if you live in like a busy city where you're surrounded by stuff all the time and there's cars going and you're at red lights and people are cutting you off in traffic and you're in crowds and there's music playing everywhere. If you're in one of those high sensory environments, you are constantly being pulled in all these different directions. Your subconscious is being pulled in all your will basically is being pulled, and I mean sort of pushed and pulled at the same time in all these different directions because there's just so much to do. There's so much craving, so much desire. So if you voluntarily relinquish those urges, those desires, you're basically overriding your primitive brain, which and it's not like your primitive brain is a bad thing necessarily, but it is that you're giving yourself a higher degree of freedom and control over your own self. I mean, what we're talking about here is basically having better command over your own mind, over your words, your thoughts, your actions. Because in my opinion, it's very easy for me, myself, to fall back into my usual routine of just thinking in the same reactionary way, meaning that everything that I see and perceive, I have a little thought in reaction to the thing that's not intentional. It's something that happens instinctively. It's just a little pure emotion. It's a little reaction, which actually guides my own thought process because I'm not being intentional about the way I'm thinking. And the reason I'm not being intentional about the way I'm thinking is in part due to giving in to willful desires too often of the time. And like if I'm driving a lot, if I'm driving in the city and somebody does something stupid, I'll just have this like emotional urge to say like, "Oh, you asshole" or something. So some like little negative little curse on that person because I get a little bit of satisfaction out of it. So that in itself is a sort of perfect example of giving in to the will, because the will is after a lot of things, of course, but dopamine is something that we want, and that right there is a little source of dopamine. And by giving into that, I'm giving into the will. And like I said, it's not about always denying the will. What asceticism is about, at the very least, it's all a spectrum, right? So you can deny the will entirely if you really wanted to, but it's more there's also other options available rather than denying the will all the time. You can just simply deny it in a controlled way, and in doing so, you get better control over your own mind, your own thoughts, your own actions, and it's just more rewarding at the end of the day. It's more pleasurable in the end, anyways, if you are controlled and intentional about how you practice your life and the sort of things that you give into, and that is asceticism.